What's going on, everyone? This is Check the Gate, and welcome to Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Wildlands on PC. We're going to be running some benchmarks, but before I get started, let me go over my specs. I have an i7-4790K at 4.0 gigahertz. That is stock speeds. A 980 Ti with 6 gigs of VRAM, 16 gigs of DDR3 memory at 1600 megahertz, Windows 10 Pro 64-bit version, and the latest Nvidia driver version 378.66. There are no game-ready drivers as of yet. This is release day, so we might see something from Nvidia today or tomorrow or later on this week. Let's go into the options screen here. You're going to see the overlay, the River Tuner overlay. I made it nice and big, so when you see in-game, you see clear and concise numbers. There are some stipulations though, so let's go into the video right away. We're going to do 1920 by 1080. And the refresh rate of my monitor's refresh rate, that's a tongue twister, 144 hertz. Now let's go back into the graphics, and the preset is Ultra. Now usually I do 4K. I ran 4K on this card, and I'm not even going to try, I'm not even going to show it or record it. I'm running 22 frames per second. No joke, on Ultra. Even at high, I was getting barely 30. This is a very demanding game. But one good thing to note, though, is that the CPUs, as you see on the left-hand side of your screen, in-game, they're running all at normal and at the same frequency. So it's really well optimized for CPU. I can guarantee if we get a game-ready driver from Nvidia, we might boost anywhere from 5 to 7 extra frames depending on your card, depending on your setting and your preset, and also if there is a performance patch later on by Ubisoft. So as you can see, Ultra setting, everything is turned on. Me personally, I don't like motion blur. I don't like iron sights depth of field or the terrain depth of field. Your eyes are not cameras. These are just gimmicks here. You know, with depth of field, it's great in a cinematic or a movie-like experience, but not in a first-person shooter, especially if competitive or co-op, if you will. But for the sake of this test, I'm going to leave it on. So, and you can see here, motion blur off, iron sights depth of field off, and terrain off. It doesn't make a difference. It's at 4768, the VRAM usage, the VRAM scale. Let's turn those back on, and as you can see, there is no change. Now, keep an eye on the VRAM scale on the bottom right-hand corner. It's not reflective of what's happening on screen, and that's what it's assuming you're going to be using, but it's not real-world numbers. So let's go ahead and run these benchmarks. And it's awesome because Wildlands has built-in benchmarks, and it added a couple more stats on the bottom screen, so let's get to it. All right, so we're getting a minimum of 39, a max of 54. This is the Ultra preset on 1920 by 1080. Let's exit out of here and change it to the very high preset and see where we're at. And as you saw the numbers on your screen with the overlay, it was in and around 52, 53, sometimes 56, 5.6 gigs, but it wasn't reflective of what was assumed here on the scale. Let's change it to very high. Let's apply it, and it's all on the fly, which is great. You don't have to restart your game, and let's run the benchmark. All right, so there we got a min of 61.5 and a max of almost 80 frames per second. That is not bad. It doesn't really look that much different. There are some subtle differences if you really keep an eye out for, but running this game on a very high preset is definitely worth the extra frames. Let's exit out of here again, and let's go to the high preset. So anisotropic filtering, you could tell that from the ultra to the high is at 4. Now keep in mind, anisotropic filtering doesn't really affect your GPU all that much. It's such a low resource, so feel free to crank this up to 16, and once you do, it's gonna change this to custom. But for the sake of this test, let's knock it down to 4, and let's apply here. And let's run a benchmark at high preset, 1920 by 1080. That is still pretty good. A minimum of 70, a max of 88. You're still getting really far rendering resolutions in the background, so it's not so bad. Like I said, it's best if you have a 970 or 980 or even 980 Ti like this card. Start with Ultra at 980, 1920 by 1080, and then work your way down. Like I mentioned before, anisotropic filtering 16 really is super duper low resource. Those are the benchmarks. For my personal taste, I'm going to turn motion blur off, iron sights depth of field off, and the terrain depth of field. Again, these are gimmicks. These are just to show off the technology in game. Once we see game ready drivers for Wildlands, I anticipate an extra 5 to 7 on the average extra frames, and then maybe some optimization by Ubisoft themselves. So even on Ultra with personalized settings, or even everything maxed out, I anticipate, and I don't doubt, 60 frames, solid 60 frames per second. Ultra on 1920 by 1080 on a 980 Ti, hell, even a 970, but not so much with the 3.5 gigahertz limit that those cards have. I used to have one, but not anymore. So if you're running a 1070 or even 1080, you're going to be doing, hell, even 1440p maxed out, no problem, plus 60 frames per second. Once again, this is Check the Gate. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.